We had this controversy, particularly in New South Wales, but right around the country, about the owners of high-rise apartments having to move out because there's cracks in the building defects and the like. There have been suggestions from the Building Commissioner in New South Wales that there should be a case of buyer beware here. Now, just how are buyers of high-rise apartments supposed to be able to work out that the whole structure is unsound? I want to bring in now the Greens MP in New South Wales, who heads up the Parliamentary Committee into Building Defects, David Shoebridge. Thanks for joining us, David. It's unrealistic, isn't it, for buyers of apartments in high-rise buildings to get some sort of building inspection on the whole construction? I mean, they should be entitled to expect the thing is safe and solid.
Well, 100%, Chris. I mean, the idea that, you know, the answer to this unquestionable crisis in confidence and quality in the construction industry is somehow for future apartment buyers to get themselves up to speed with the structural plans, you know, assessing the quality of the foundations, reviewing the fire safety works. I mean, even if you could undertake those roles, the idea that that would be a reasonable obligation on someone who's just buying an apartment is utterly bizarre. And the fact that the newly appointed Building Commissioner, and he's not yet 3 months on the job, the fact that that's one of his primary solutions, which is putting more responsibility on consumers, more responsibility on home purchasers rather than on himself and the state government to ensure standards, that was pretty astounding evidence, I thought, and deeply worrying, you know, for those thousands of people who have got a property which has already got a defect or people thinking about buying a new property.
Yeah, I mean, it's completely impractical. The only way you could properly do it, I suppose, is if every apartment purchaser got together and had a full assessment and they shared the costs, but that would never be practical because you don't know who's buying what and when. And this is where surely government regulation has to do the job. If a high-rise building is approved and constructed, there needs to be a government process to make sure that it's met all the standards.
Well, absolutely. And even assuming, you know, every single putative apartment owner got together and pooled their money and decided to get a structural engineer and a fire safety expert and a, you know, waterproofing expert and everybody to do every available study, you can't find some of the key latent defects. You can't go underneath the tiles and find out if the waterproofing has been done properly. You can't, you know, drill sufficient core samples into the foundations to find out if the reinforcing steel is there in place. You know, you can't identify the depth of the concrete that's been used in the basement slabs. There are a whole bunch of latent defects that even the most astute, fully resourced apartment purchaser couldn't identify, and nor should they be considered reasonable. We've had a bit over 2 decades now of deregulation and privatisation across the board in the construction industry. At the same time, construction projects have become much more complicated. And it's that almost like a pincer movement that is now having the effect and meaning we cannot depend upon the build quality, and it's why we need to re-regulate and it's why we need government to do its job, not some future home buyer.
So your inquiry is still underway, isn't it? How close are we to having some sort of action? Because, as you say, it will require some legislation.
Yeah, well, we are going to be delivering an interim report in a bit over a week, dealing with the evidence that we've captured. Before we deliver that interim report, we're going to have a brief review of a piece of legislation the New South Wales government is proposing to deal with part of the crisis. They tabled that legislation a week ago. I think it'd be fair to say that stakeholders across the board have been very critical with that piece of legislation the government has tabled as being largely ineffectual. It all hinges upon regulations which the government hasn't even commenced drafting in New South Wales yet. But one of the key issues that I think this government is in denial about is we have no system for regulating the quality of the actual building work that's been done. Nobody watching or ensuring that the waterproofing is done in accordance with Australian standards. Nobody on site or responsible for the quality of the formwork that's been put in place, the reinforcing steel. And at the end of the day, we have a private certifier who gets a series of certificates or pieces of paper from the different trades that says it's all been built, you know, in accordance with the National Construction Code and in accordance with the construction certificate. But nobody who's providing that certification is registered, is licensed or is insured. That none of them have any skin in the game. And that means at the end of the day, what the private certifier is signing off on is just a whole bunch of pieces of paper with no substance to it. We need to ensure that all of those various trades, all of those people doing building work are accountable for their building work and are producing work that's of quality standard.
Yep,
and that's what's missing.
It's got to happen, and most of us have assumed over recent years that's what would be happening. Obviously it's not, it's a big problem, it's got to be fixed. David, while I've got you, the Greens are moving in State Parliament to get rid of the opening prayers. What's wrong with a prayer at the opening of Parliament?
Well, people are entitled to pray or not pray to their god or gods, whoever they choose. I think there's a key problem, though, in a society as diverse as the society we have in New South Wales. You know, a very diverse migrant society of people of all different faiths. And, you know, within those faiths, all different churches and organisations. To suggest that we can have one prayer, you know, one prayer to rule them all, you know, one prayer to bind them, I think that's really a 19th century solution.
Well,
so
yeah, but it's history, it's tradition. It was set up as a Christian institution, I suppose, and so there's a part of history there. We have Welcome to Country to recognise another part of our tradition and our history. Why eliminate this part of our tradition? As you say, whether you agree with it or not, you can be thinking or doing something else at the same time.
Well, that's exactly what my colleague is proposing in her proposed changes. Her proposal is that there be a minute where people reflect on whatever they wish to reflect upon. If they wish to pray to whichever god or gods that they have, they can pray to whichever god or gods that they have. We have that minute of reflection at the beginning, and then we get on with the business of Parliament. But the idea that, you know, just one prayer from just one part of the Christian tradition is going to be representing a modern, diverse, multicultural society like New South Wales, I don't think that's appropriate. The Greens don't think that's appropriate.
It's the tradition upon which the institutions were founded. It's part of the history and the tradition that has led to this great multicultural country.
Well, I'm all for traditions while they're retaining traditions that retain currency with society. And there's, you know, all sorts of good traditions, you know, the rule of law, freedom of speech, you know, these are great traditions. But the idea that reading just one prayer from just one religion is something that we should be maintaining in a modern parliament representing a society as diverse as New South Wales. Well, we'll just have to agree to disagree on that, Chris. I think we should move on.